mata hoki. Taka te hau ki te uru, whakatake te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kine kina ki huta, kia mā kine kina, mā taratara ki toi, e hiaki ata, he tio, he hoka, he hau hu, ti hei Māori ora. Wa tēnā tātou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, kahi onori tia, kini tu heitia pōtatau, beautiful, ai noho mai, I ronga I tā huru a tapu, wana tupuna, o tōna whahoki. Ana ki te whare ki nui tonu pai marere ki ara. E nā mati I o te marama. O haina mai rātou ki rongi te whare ki o mati, ki a tangihia, ki a mihia, ki a waihoa ki rātou, ki rātou, tātou tohonga ora ki a tātou. E nā maunga whakahi, e nā wai whakatiri tani wha putu noa I te rohi, putu noa I te rohi o te Arawa, tēnā koutou katoa. Wa tēnā rā tātou katoa, tēnā te reo whakamihi mo te kaunihera a rohi o Waikato, mihi atu nei, tēnā koutou katoa. Delia, Joe, koutou katoa o te Arawa River Iwi Trust, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou, nau mai, haere mai, tō mātou whare. He pai ki a mātou kua toi mai koutou I rungi I te karango te rā, tautoko tātou kaupapa. Tātou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa.
Kia ora, kanui te mihi ki a koe Stu, mō te mihi, mō te kapakia, and kanui te mihi ki a tātou, everyone here today to join us, councillors and staff from our respective entities today for our Waikato Regional Council Te Arawa River Iwi Trust Co-Governance meeting. Just noting in terms of the agenda that we work through, that we're noting apologies, calling for apologies. So we've received that the apologies of Evelyn, Pamela, Perry, and Councillor Mitch be accepted. Do we have? Thank you. Thank you, Stu. Kia ora, Cedric. All in favour, say aye. Against? Carried. Kia ora. Also, secondly, just for the purpose of the meeting, and we've noted, well, for us, for Te Arawa River Iwi Trust, and just introducing actually our trustee, Cedric Forrest. Some of you probably haven't met Cedric, but he has come on board to Te Arawa River Iwi Trust. He has been appointed and replaced for Ngāti Tahu Ngāti Whaua, Roger Pikia, who was a previous member of our board. So just noting for the record, actually, and confirmation from the committee that Cedric Forrest is now noted as an alternate at Te Arawa River Iwi Trust end, but for the purpose of the committee, just seeking confirmation that they accept, and also for the purpose of a quorum, requiring 2 from both entities, that Cedric be noted. Confirmed. Right. Right, so just confirming that the agenda of the Te Arawa River Iwi Trust and Waikato Regional Council Co-Governance Committee of today, 31st of October, as circulated with the addition of the tabled item that was provided early this morning, yesterday, Kapai, be confirmed as the business for the meeting. I have someone move that. Thanks, Drew. And that was seconded by Cedric. All in favour, say aye. And against? Carried. Just calling for any any disclosures in relation to any potential or actual conflicts of interest outlined in the agenda or about the agenda? No, Kapai. And just moving on to now the previous minutes and just call for confirmation of the previous minutes. Yep. I was also present at that meeting, so I think I was the only other trustee present today. I was present at that meeting, so yeah, I'll second that. Thanks. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Aye, carried.
Okay, I'll just briefly introduce myself too. I'm Bruce Clarkson. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Regional Council and I'm pleased to be the co-chair for today. So we're going to start first with a verbal update, I believe, from Marley on the CouncilMARK Excellence Assessment invitation. Thank you, Marley.
Ia ku rangatira tēnā koutou. Look, I am the stand-in this morning for Emma Kellett, who was really keen to get in front of Te Arawa River Iwi Trust this morning to provide you with a very brief update on the CouncilMARK program, but unfortunately she's unwell. And so just a bit of information for you about the CouncilMARK program. And perhaps starting first with what we have done in previous years. Back in 2016, our council was one of 23 councils that put themselves forward for an assessment under the Local Government Excellence Program. And this program is essentially designed for councils to assess performance and I guess get some insight into where we're performing well and also highlight areas where we might want to focus to make some improvements. And so Waikato Regional Council has committed to undertake a refreshed version of the Excellence Program. That program is called CouncilMARK and it is basically delivered by Local Government New Zealand. And so we are very much in the preparation stage to undertake the assessment. The assessment is in two parts. It includes a self-assessment with questionnaires that are completed by our staff with input from our councillors, but also there is an opportunity within the assessment process to have our key stakeholders and iwi partners meet with assessors to give their view of Waikato Regional Council performance. And so to date, Emma, who is leading this program of work, has sent out some initial engagement to our iwi partners, including Tarot. And so today really was just an opportunity to emphasise with our iwi partner, Tarot, that this program of work is underway and we would really value participation in the assessment. And so we would like, I guess, either Joe, the CE, to come along and speak with our assessors or a delegate from Tarot, really over to Tarot to determine how they'd like to participate in the assessment. That assessment is scheduled for Wednesday, the 15th of November, so a couple of weeks until that kicks off, well, that part of the assessment, and it will be here at Council in the afternoon, but we can work out the detail once Tarot has identified whom they might like to send along to participate in that. That's it from me, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Marley. And so any questions or comments from anybody here today? Yes, Jo.
Thanks, Marley, and did receive the invite. Unfortunately, not able to be at particular hui, but we will make sure that I'm representing their conversation at another time. Just wondered, recently I participated in a conversation with OAG around similar kinds of things, and just wonder how they kind of vary with each other. You know, a lot of surveying, but you know what happens at the end of that. Maybe directed at Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Through you, Chairs. Thanks, Joe. So if I just go back to why we're doing this, because look, I know there's a lot of surveys out there at the moment, and everyone's been asked to contribute to so many things. So I appreciate that. This is part of our own internal journey to kind of strive to improve. Actually, when we went out with our strategic direction earlier in this year, we've got on the back the way we work, and there's 4 areas we particularly want to report back to our council about internal progress we're making. One of them is in terms of how we work with our customers, how we innovate, our culture, and our excellence. Because what we're wanting to do is find those areas of the business that others would perceive we could do better in, and put some focus there. And so the point of the survey, and we've chosen to go with an LGNZ survey. So you ask, how does this all fit together? It's voluntary that we're doing this. LGNZ, as Marley said, had done one for us a bunch of years ago in a number of councils. There was a little bit of tiresome of it, so LGNZ has gone and revamped it completely to be a little bit more, you know, what the clients want as opposed to what LGNZ wants to try and push. This will get reported through our Finance and Services Committee, where we have regular trying to internally. So hope that answers the question as best I can. Yeah, could well be other surveys for other people out there, but this is quite internally focused, and to help our council understand how well we're doing internally and where maybe should be going.
Just spoke with the Office of the Auditor General 2 weeks ago. In terms of similar kind of things, how was the Regional Council doing in terms of their interactions with in the freshwater space? So yeah, just want to make sure that there is some, you know, we're not having lots of conversations that aren't going anywhere.
Sorry, through you, Chairs, I just clicked onto what that is. So that space has been an interesting journey, because maybe about 10 years ago, we were selected as one of 4 councils throughout the country where the Office of the Auditor General decided to audit regional councils. And I think at the time they said the 3, which was South and Taranaki and ourselves, they said, well, we'll do you first and we won't do you again, we'll rotate around other councils. Actually, in the infinite wisdom, what they decided, no, they'll keep going back to those same councils to benchmark progress over time. Yeah. But it's specifically around how we're trying to make improvements in the freshwater policy space. So that doesn't segue or interact, crossover with us at all. And so that's the latest survey that they're doing.
Any more questions or comments? If not, I'm interested as to whether there is a mover and a seconder for. Okay.
Just the update.
Okay, so the run sheet. Okay. So we'll just receive the verbal report. Okay. So if everybody's in favour of receiving the verbal report, all in favour? Thank you. Carried. So the next item on our agenda relates to the long-term plan, and we have Haven Walsh who's going to present. So we'll just give him a little time to walk up to the front there, and he's going to tell us about the progress in relation to the 2024-2034 long-term plan. Thank you, Haven. If you could just introduce yourself and give people a little bit of background about where you fit into the organisation. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Clarkson. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko urupu Te whakapaparanga mai, ko Kimiriti te whenua tupu, ko Kimiriti te kāinga, he Corporate Planning Manager o I, ko Kunihira Arohe o Waikato o, ko Haven Walsh toko ingoa, tēnā tātou katoa. My name's Haven Walsh, and I'm the Corporate Planning Manager here at Waikato Regional Council. So mainly our role is looking after our annual report, our annual plan, our long-term plan, and helping out with business planning. So yeah, this report is essentially just a high-level report to give you an overview of where we're at with our long-term plan process. I get the sense that there's probably a familiarity with the long-term plan process from previous iterations, previous cycles, but essentially it was just to give you an overview of where we're at and note what the long-term plan is, which is essentially just the document that we pull together every 3 years under the Local Government Act, maps out everything we do, how much it will cost, and how it's going to be paid for. Ultimately, it does set the rates for the financial year, and then we use that as a check on over the future years of the cycle. Right now, staff and councillors are in the process of pulling together the work program, which we're trying to closely align with our new strategic direction, which was just referenced before in the previous item. So yeah, we're looking at how councillors and our activity leads think is the best way to give effect to that strategic direction. We're also mindful of what's going on in the current environment with a mind to keep things, I guess, realistic and affordable. So early next year, we will look to approve a draft long-term plan for consultation so that we can go out and formally engage with our community. And we do want to keep all our committees informed as we go along the process. So with that, happy to open up for any comments or discussion, questions.
Thank you, Haven. So does anyone have any questions or comments to make at this point? All self-evident. We all know what a long-term plan is, and it looks like you're off the hook, Haven.
Yeah, just quick question for me, I guess, just in understanding the interaction and engagement that's been undertaken with the iwi in this process. And I imagine that's sort of stepped out in our implementation plan. Yeah, I guess just in terms of these co-governance agreements, does that engagement look different to sort of wider iwi engagement into the LTP process?
The engagement to date, from my understanding, was just before I started, Chris and our ELT members met with each committee meeting to help just flesh out what our new strategic direction was going to be. Then we've set it. Now we've been doing all the work to best give effect that. And then the intention is to come to all the future governance meetings throughout the process.
To receive input?
To receive input, and depending on the timing of those meetings, it might look a little bit different, whether it's helping inform consultation documents or if it's already kind of past that, then just noting the timeframes and dates for engagement, that kind of thing. We're working on our communications and engagement plan. So I guess if there's any advice or recommendations about the best way to engage with different groups along the way, we would like to hear that now or at any of those future meetings as well. And then we can look to build in the best type of engagement.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
Kia ora, thank you. Just wondered if there are any significant things significant changes in direction, I guess, that has, I know the remit is so huge, but is there anything that different?
Yeah, there is a big, broad work program, so we are working through that. I guess there's lots of ambition and intention to do things differently, but I guess we are, just with everything going on, really mindful of keeping things affordable and in check for our community. So although there's always more things that everyone wants to do, they do always seem to cost more and more. So it's just trying to get that balance right. Our strategic direction has had some changes from the last iteration, so we are just trying to work through and refine those. But I'm not seeing, and perhaps Chris can correct me if it's different, but I'm not seeing large swaths of new projects and ideas coming into this long-term plan.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, kia ora, three chairs. As Haven says, we have had a first session of councillors about strategic direction, and what that means and the opportunities are that are in it. We got a bit of feedback on it, and given that we already have the pressures in the current work programs and the inflationary environment, got a big impact of revaluation of our assets that's required through accounting procedures, which is going to have a bit of an uplift on depreciation we need to get. We, like every other council in the country, is in a fairly tight position going into this LTP. The upward drivers where we're getting business cases prepared, where there's the most sort of interest and support that came back from council was in the biodiversity space, and also in the infrastructure space, and particularly trying to move towards with a lot of our infrastructure assets, making sure they're sustainable going forward, both in the sense of being environmentally sustainable but affordable. And a lot of the assets in the lower reaches of the Hauraki and the Waikato catchments, there's a lot of pressures in there. And we've got a project that we want to be trialling to actually have discussions with communities for actually, are they sustainable and affordable going the long term, or do we have to look at other options compared to just protecting, building bigger and protecting going. So that's two areas that council has signalled that they'd be interested in additional investment. There's I think, Haven, a little bit of additional business cases in the water space as well, and the coastal space. But some of the ongoing drivers, just like with the policy program, and I think later on the agenda we've got the Freshwater Policy, where that's going, that is driving into the next LTP as well, let alone the implementation of the development. Haven, is it sounding?
Yep, that aligns with what we're seeing coming through in the business cases right now.
Any more questions or comments? Thank you very much, Haven, for your presentation. And we'll be waiting to see the outcome, of course, of all of those business cases that are yet to be discussed. At least 2 or 3 more iterations, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can move on to the next item on the agenda. Oh, sorry, yeah, well, can I just have a mover and a seconder to receive the report from Haven, Stu, and one other? Here, Cedric. All those in favour? Aye, carried. So moving on then to the Freshwater Policy Review work that Chris inferred was coming shortly, and it's the next item. So the update on Freshwater Policy Review work. Bruce and Peter, are they around?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay,
tēnā koutou
so-
katoa, yeah.
So over to you then, Peter.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. So tēnā koutou katoa, ko Peter Wishart taku ingoa, he Senior Policy Advisor, he kaumāhia ki te kanahera, Arohia Waikato, tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm Peter Wishart, I'm a Senior Policy Advisor in the Water Policy team, and I'm here just to give an update on the Freshwater Policy Review. Co-chairs, if you're happy, I'll just perhaps just give some context and then just speak briefly to the report, and happy to take any questions that members might have.
Yep, that's good.
Yep. Okay, so I guess the overarching context is that the government back in 2020 they introduced another iteration of the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management. And of course, the implications for the regional councils that they have to review the freshwater provisions of their regional plan and their regional policy statements. And of course, that's what we've been doing. So we're now several years in. And in saying that, we have had two rounds of consultation with tangata whenua, community sector groups, and those are complete. The feedback that we've received has been used to inform policy development and further assist with a deeper understanding of some of the key concepts that lie within the NPSFM, particularly Te Mana Rota Wai, which of course has been present in previous versions of the the NPS-FM, but it's now the fundamental concept, and it introduces a hierarchy of obligations, with the first, of course, being the health and the well-being, the mana, of fresh water. Second is the needs of people, particularly in regards to drinking water, and then third, the ability of communities to be able to meet their well-beings in terms of economics, social and cultural well-being. So just to reiterate, it's a hierarchy. It's not a balancing act. It's stated quite clearly that the expectation is Te Manawa is to be given prominence. Other aspects which have been addressed, particularly in regard to tangata whenua, has been around the compulsory values such as mahinga kai, and also how to incorporate Mātauranga Māori into council science and monitoring and reporting programs. The round 1 report is available on the website, and I also can say that the round 2 report is also now available on the website. The link isn't there in your reports, but it certainly is available on the council's website. And perhaps what I'll do is, after I finish my presentation, I'll just pop the link into the comment section. In terms of Te Arawa and Tarat, we had a very successful round 2 wānanga at the Te Tauki Marae. And again, we heard much about how Te Manawa Te Wai is to be given expression at the local level, but also the long-term visions that Tarat hold for the Waikato River and the associated freshwater bodies. Another aspect, and this is perhaps more of a governance aspect, is looking how to accommodate, as is required by the NPS-FM and JMA agreements, of course, is in terms of iwi involvement and collaboration and decision-making. I understand there are mechanisms which are being investigated at the moment. I'm not able to speak further on that, but just to say that certainly these are being considered. What I can say is that to assist that body and also the project generally is an advisory mechanism which is established, and that's the Ngātira Mātauranga working group, which has had 3 sessions. The first session was just looking at the kawa and protocols in terms of how that group is to operate, and the second was looking at Te Manawa Te Wai, long-term visions, environmental outcomes, and the third was getting into more attributes. What is it about our water bodies in terms of quality, and what needs to happen in terms of bottom lines? Obviously, if a water body is below a national bottom line, action needs to be taken to bring it up to at least the bottom line. And indeed, in terms of long-term visions that we're hearing from our communities and tangata whenua, is that we need to be above the bottom lines. But that's a long-term process. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight. Staff, council staff are working on developing the draft policy in terms of amendments to the regional plan and the regional policy statement, and that work is progressing. And we're looking to then use that work to inform our round 3 engagement, which is likely to occur in the new year. We're also keeping ourselves up to speed with environmental management plans that iwi have published, deeds of settlement and territory claim settlement legislation. And of course, I guess the predominant one in terms of the Waikato and Waipa catchments is Te Ture Whaimana o Te Ara Waikato. And of course, that itself, the vision and strategy document, is also undergoing a review. And there is perhaps opportunities there for a bit of cross-linkages. Before I close to take questions, I'll just touch on Plan Change 1, Healthy Rivers by Order. Currently going through the Environment Court process. Preliminary to that, there was an exchange of evidence and expert conferencing, which occurred in September of this year. The Environment Court commenced its hearing on the 25th of September, and the court has laid down approximately 6 weeks of hearing time, which will take us through to December, just before Christmas. And I think there's an expectation that the court will be handing down a decision sometime in probably the second quarter of 2024. So co-chairs, that's my overview. I'm more than happy to field any questions that members might wish to put to me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter. That's a great summary. So any questions, any comments anybody wanted to make at this point? Doesn't look like there are any.
I guess I just had one there. Just sort of understanding that obviously, and well done to yourself and your team and sort of working through this Kaupapa, the MPSFM, as we know, and for the last over 3-4 years now, in the policy and planning space, and thinking about the resource for iwi and hapu participation is not an easy feat. And as we've seen with other government legislation reforms with affordable water, we have a number of our technicians and hapu and whānau and marae sort of trying to navigate that space. I guess just for me, understanding where there are potential, a lot of our iwi and hapu have stressed that there's lacks that resource to participate effectively. There only is sort of several technicians sort of on the ground to assist iwi nationwide. So understanding in your experience or observation through engagement, has there been any opportunity to work so iwi are identifying their freshwater values through, for example, te manawa te wai statements. Those are being sort of developed, I understand, by some of the Te Arawa River iwi and Te Arawa iwi general. Is there any sort of overlap or support that's been recognised by Waikato Regional Council to assist iwi and hapu? You know, obviously they're slightly two different constructs, limits and attributes, the MPSFM, but for Te Manawa Te Wai statements, it's more sort of a catchment view and approach on managing fresh water use and discharge. But yeah, has in your view over the engagement sort of highlighted
Thank you.
the opportunity for Waikato Regional Council and potentially local councils to be working together?
Thank you,
to assist
Co-Chair
iwi?
Delia. Yeah. Commend the round 2 report, where we had a lot of feedback coming from Tangata Whenua, including both iwi and hapu. And of course, the vehicle which Council has established is Ngā Tira Mataronga. I understand that TARAT members are fully involved in that. We have also assigned a policy analyst, Mariana Tatai, to assist that process to help form up the policy, the feedback that comes through iwi and hapu to feed into the plan process. I mean, I must say that I acknowledge just how busy everyone is, the demands that are being made, not only on councils themselves, but of course the wider community, and also in particular iwi and hapu, just all the different government work streams and what have you. We wait with bated breath to see if there's going to be any amendments that come after November the 3rd. So that's not too far away. It has been quite an involved process, as you're aware. I mean, there are many iwi and hapu groups around the rohe of Waikato, not only within the Waikato and Waipa, which we've been dealing with Plan Change 1, but of course in terms of the West Coast and also in terms of Hauraki Coromandel. So I think the round 3 is going to be important, where we bring back, in terms of wānanga and also back to Ngā Tira Mataronga, the thinking and in draft form, the higher order statements like Te Manawa Te Wai, long-term visions, environmental outcomes, but also looking at rules and other mechanisms to be able to address being able to restore water, our freshwater resources. I hope that gives you some indication of the work that we've been doing.
Yes, it does. Thanks, Peter. I think that Te Manawa Te Wai being sort of embedded so far in the legislation is probably the mechanism that will enable that for our people to participate effectively.
Now, of course, I'd comment as well as Te Manawa Te Whai Mana, of course, sits above the MPSFM, so there's a very high statutory and legislative direction there as well. So what we're doing is somewhat subservient to that work stream which is occurring. And of course, the Te Whai Mana is also already embedded in the regional policy statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? No? Thank you. Thank you for that, Peter. Do I have a mover and a seconder for receiving this? We have Stu and Delia. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you, Peter.
Kia ora.
So we have next on our agenda, the item is the Waikato Biodiversity Accord, and Angus McKenzie, I believe, is here. Thank you, Angus. He's going to introduce this topic for us and tell us a little bit about what's intended for the Waikato Biodiversity Accord.
Kia ora koutou. Angus McKenzie toku ingoa. Thank you for allowing me to present today. I'm also a substitute, probably what Marley said a little bit. I'm helping Judy Van Rossum with the Waikato Biodiversity Accord and trying to pull that together, assisting with the engagement side of that. But Judy's away at another forum today, so I've subbed in. I'm not part of the bomb squad. I hope I can do a reasonable job today. I'm a consultant for Waikato Regional Council and work across various projects for the council. And I'm doing a little bit of work in Bay of Plenty at the moment as well. I'm helping out with Lakeweed and trying to get pull together a business case and working with Willie on that one. So that's been.
Angus, could you just come a little closer?
Apologies.
Yeah, you've got to really swallow it almost.
You got to swallow these. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies. So yeah, the report you've got there introduces the intention of the Regional Council to progress a Waikato Biodiversity Accord with key stakeholders, and that's part of Council's current strategic direction, which I've already mentioned today. So by way of background, you've got the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, which came out on the 4th of August this year into effect, and that's an important regulatory tool which will drive Te Mana o Te Taiao, which is the New Zealand Biodiversity Strategy, which was prepared a number of years ago by the Department of Conservation, 2020 that is. So the new NPS contains many directives for councils, and one of those is a statutory requirement that councils develop a regional biodiversity strategy. The intent of this is to ensure that each region develops and implements a community and stakeholder-driven plan for restoring biodiversity at a landscape scale. So not a small challenge, but one that's now set with legislation. So there's a generous time frame for getting those strategies together. It's 10 years, and there's a strong focus on tangata whenua as partners with that and incorporating Māori worldviews. The Waikato Biodiversity Accord seeks to bring together those organisations that have core responsibilities for biodiversity management to work together to develop that strategy. So this is really the first step in that process towards working towards that strategy. The council envisaged a sort of simple non-statutory agreement to be entered into voluntarily by the signatory parties. At this stage, it would contain a purpose statement, objectives, and a statement of commitment to work together. This is flexible, and we'll see what the parties would like to have in it as we go around engaging, consulting on it. We already have some examples of similar documents in the Waikato, so it's Waipa Peat Lakes Agreement and Wetlands Accord, and a similar one for the Waikato Lakes. Principal signatories will be those with statutory biodiversity management functions, and in the report there's a table that sets out those parties. So Department of Conservation, the regional local authorities, Ministry of Primary Industries, QE2 Trust, and our key iwi partners as well. Once the accord's formalised, we propose that signatories work together to prepare a regional biodiversity strategy, and this would involve bringing along all other stakeholders, such as industry and advocacy groups with an interest in biodiversity management to help with this task. So that'd be a much wider, more involved process. By taking this two-phase approach, we're hoping we can have those conversations early about the best and most efficient way to work together, to actually pull it together, because yeah, it is a big complex piece of work. And given the heavy consultation loads that we've probably already noted in this forum, we're very mindful of that as well. So the next 2 to 3 months, we'd like to engage with iwi and agency partners to provide a heads up on the accord, with a workshop towards the end of this year, hopefully, all going well. Hopefully we can host that to discuss the structure and content of that. And as I mentioned before, it's not a heavily involved document, but more a commitment to work together towards a strategy. So the aim is to develop a draft accord by June next year and look to get that signed off by this council June next year. Greatly appreciate a steer from this committee as to how to best approach it and who might help us with drafting the content of the accord. So really levels of interest and how we might work together in the future as well. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions and would appreciate your advice.
Okay, thank you, Angus. So do we have any questions for Angus? Joe?
Good, Angus. Thank you for that. Just wondered, I'm just trying to get my head around how that would look. So it's one accord, multiple stakeholders. And so how did you see that implemented? I guess it feels quite complex with all those stakeholders.
Great question. It's where my head goes immediately as well. It would be implemented through the strategy. So the detail of the implementation would be done through the strategy. This is more about getting the partners together to say, okay, we're happy to work on a strategy together to get it implemented. So it's really about making sure that we have a commitment and we can talk about how we could work and ways of working as well to get that done.
Are you able to just give people an indication of the timescale? Because the NPS has a timescale in relation to the biodiversity strategy.
To pull that strategy together.
Yeah. So there's a fair bit of time available.
Probably too long. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the question I would have, as many of you will know, that biodiversity and biosecurity, one of my key interests, I wouldn't be wanting to wait for 10 years. And in fact, it is interesting to note that several other regional councils in New Zealand already have a biodiversity strategy, which they have in advance of even the existence of the NPS. So there's something to think about there.
Yeah, and in terms of the accord, sorry, Chris, in terms of the accord, there's an agreement in the top of the South already in place, similar to the accord that we have here with iwi and local councils.
Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, through your co-chairs. I think that the way we're looking at this is that the Waikato's had a lot of biodiversity decline over a long period of time. And we really want to try and think, what can we do to make a meaningful difference going forward? And it's going to take a lot of parties to work together and probably try and get some sort of collective impact and some momentum going. And so I've got it as a KPI. Is to try and get the accord, which is the start of the process. And by having it as my KPI, it's putting the heat on staff to try and deliver the accord. Of course, it depends on willing other parties to want to be part of it. But we just feel that this is a really important first step. And probably just look to you, Professor Clarkson, because you've been involved in Taranaki and other places, I know. And I know that even if ultimate ambition, it will take time to actually start to get the strategy in place to be able to implement, but I think you have some experience of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd be perfectly honest with all of you in the room today that one of the reasons that I ran for council was I've been watching biodiversity in this region for a very long time and what's been happening to it in terms of degradation and decline. And so that was obviously one of my motivations for actually coming into council. And I've been involved very directly with two other major regional councils, Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Taranaki Regional Council, which went through the accord phase more than a decade ago. And in the case of both Taranaki and Hawke's Bay, formulated a biodiversity strategy also almost a decade ago, not quite a decade ago. So they've been in this space for quite a long time. And the reason that I'm keen on this for our region too is I've seen the benefits of those approaches in two other regions in New Zealand. And the benefits really are quite simple. It's about how do you encourage and get people to actually collectively work together on what is a massive issue, because you can't do it on your own. There's no way. And to some extent, this is also part of what some people might consider the unfunded mandate that we've been handed by national policy statements, and it applies to all of us, both to hapu and iwi and the regional council resources limited too. So the question is, what is central government bringing to the party? Part of the way that we can influence central government is to get those partners around the table, like, for example, the Department of Conservation. If we really are serious about dealing to the degradation in our region, we have to have really close working relationships with agencies like Department of Conservation, MFE, MPI, all of them are in the mix. And then, you know, together we can, I guess, cause the influence and pressure which will ensure that better resources are put in place to assist in achieving this reversal of biodiversity decline. So yeah, that's the reason that I'm particularly interested in this topic. I've watched it work in other places. I'm a great admirer of, because I come from Taranaki, I've been heavily involved in my life and what's been going on down there. And to see some of the thresholds they've achieved in the last 4 or 5 years is just remarkable. So the national park down there, you'll be aware, Te Papakura o Taranaki has been finally given the designation of appropriate co-management. And already one of the consequences of that has been the extermination of goats from the national park, which is unheralded. You know, people have been working on that for the last, I want to say 50 to 60 years. I think that's not exaggerating. And only when the community, iwi, hapu, Department of Conservation, and all the environmental groups in Taranaki came together collectively do they actually get themselves into a space where they could achieve that massive achievement of now in that national park, there are no goats, there are no deer, there are no pigs, and the response from the native biodiversity is just unbelievable. I'm now giving you a pep talk on go and have a look and see what we can do. Now, we also know that here in the Waikato, through projects like Maunga Tautari and Pironia, which has got its 21st birthday celebrations this Saturday coming, similar results have been achieved, but not quite as at large scale as has occurred in some of those other places. So we're really aiming for large scale change. And the only way we can achieve that, and that is also, you know, signaled, the importance of this project is signaled in the fact that this is on the CE's KPIs. So poor old Chris has got me on his back now, so, because this is my pet project. So yeah, thanks for that opportunity, Chris. So any other questions or comments? Well, look, I'd like to thank you, Angus, and I'm seeking a mover and a seconder for receiving the report. We've got Stu and I've got Cedric again. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. That's great, Angus. Great summary. Yep.
We now move into the updates from Te Arawa Iwi Trust. Would Joe have an update on some of the kaupapa we have at the moment? Kia ora.
Really probably talking to the converter here in some ways, but using these opportunities to just have a chat about the invasive plan, we're going to call it now because we don't want to call it gold plated anymore, and just the impact that it has had already, and you know, has the potential to have. And I guess really wanting more of a discussion with you guys around where that kind of sits in terms of the long-term plan. And I sit on the governance group with MPI and the government agency that deals in this space. Biodiversity. Yeah, Biodiversity, Biosecurity New Zealand. You know, we'll do so much, but I think we will live and breathe this here because it is already here, and they will take a much more sort of national view. But yeah, really interested in where you're at. I'm sure all of you know how invasive it is, and team and I have been down at Bob's Landing with other iwi when they did a dig trying to remove some of them. And when you see the scale, what is already here, it's pretty mind-blowing, really. We thought that we could, clear a space. We took up in about 4 hours, about 40 of us took up about 125 kilos of clams, and we didn't touch them. And that was when mercury dropped the river levels. So that about 20 metres the river was dropped, and the clams were right to the river, and we don't know how far beyond that went. So and when you understand, I think what is their breeding cycle around, they can reproduce around 70,000 a year. It's on a scale we probably haven't experienced before in terms of their invasiveness and their impact on infrastructure, mahinga kai, taonga species. Like the impact is potentially enormous. And I guess we're really keen, because we're in the upper end of the river, where it hasn't been found yet. We're keen for it not to get any further upriver, and also because we are based in the Rotorua area where there are, significant freshwater lakes. So we're really interested in Waikato response, I guess, and the thinking that may go into that long-term plan.
From my perspective, it's been radio silence for a blooming month or two now, so I'd really like to know where we're at the moment. I'm not sure if you on the governance group have got anything you can add that we don't already know. I suspect it probably isn't, but yeah.
I probably can't add a lot, and I think Iwi's view on that committee has been that things have moved, the responses have been pretty slow. And talking with other people in the governance space, I think there's almost a resignation that it's here. And they were looking to do some trials. I've missed the last hui, unfortunately, but they were looking to do some trials to look at eliminating it. That's gone. So it seems there's a lot of work gone into the engagement and programs at the likes of Karapiro and other spaces where, but in terms of getting rid of it, it does feel like they've kind of accepted that for the lower part of the river. That's something we kind of almost have to look at here.
I mean,
probably wants a comment from them.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, obviously, as a new organism or whatever the blooming describing word is, it's obviously a MPI responsibility, and I'm unwanted. Yeah, I'm keen for us to keep us to keep holding the government to account to make sure, but equally, I want us to get in behind the minute it transfers into our responsibility. Sure, when that previous experience of unwanted the new incursions as well, then.
So my understanding of the current state of play, and I'll defer to Chris because he may have heard more than me, but I did recently meet with Patrick Whaley about some of this issue, because I for one have been really concerned about the glacial response, and both Chris and I and Patrick attended the Environment Select Committee meeting where we asked all the right questions, I thought, and made all of the correct comments about, well, really, what are you actually doing? So my understanding is that Patrick has, in the last week at least, been working extremely closely with MPI, who have finally sort of grasped the notion that actually they're going to have to put together a collective implementation plan as opposed to just have discussions. And one of the key features of the implementation that is being discussed at the moment is to do with the check, clean and dry process in terms of stations at appropriate locations where boat users might potentially be the vector for moving that clam more widely in the catchment. There's also just in the last few days been some tests undertaken in Lake Taupo again at Waitahanui, I think, because there was some unconfirmed commentary around the likelihood that the clam had actually already got into the lake. And so far, all the results that have come back have been negative. I've heard from Greg Ryan twice, I think, this week on negative results. So, which is great. But what it does keep underscoring is what is needed to prevent and to contain the clam in its current location is really about boat usage. And it's about what is being done at boat ramps to ensure that people are not launching boats that are contaminated into places like Lake Taupo and other lakes across the whole of the North Island, actually, and eventually potentially across the whole of the country. So I agree that they've been somewhat slow, but I have started to detect, and I'll get Chris to comment on this, some picking up of speed in the last couple of weeks and some much greater collaborative approaches to what is the respective role of all of us in this. You see it again, it's another collective response that's needed, not just MPI sort of standing up there and giving us a message about what they think should happen, because the action must occur at place. Containment can only occur at place, not because somebody in Wellington says something. So, Chris, did you want to comment?
Only what I can. I think that you're both probably more up to the play of what I am, but a couple of general comments and a couple of specific ones. So one is that it's calling into light how biosecurity is managed in New Zealand. Yeah. And I think that the kaupapa that Bruce and I, Patrick Whaley, had with the select committee was, if it's a primary industry sort of biosecurity risk, it seems to get immediate response and a lot of money thrown at it. When it's an environmental biodiversity risk, it seems to go on a back burner. And given it crossed the border into New Zealand, we just felt that there wasn't enough attention given straight away. We'll explain what happens as opposed to actually do something about it. It was really sad to hear when you did go out and find that it's got away a lot more than anybody could have expected, and then you start hearing reports, oh, you've been seeing it on filter for a while, and but no one had realised what the impact of it was. To get into it's our responsibility, I guess. It has to get into our regional pest management plan, and which is already chock-a-block with all sorts of pests and funding on it. So I'm not too sure where that goes next. We've also got marine biosecurity organisms, which are being a major problem, spreading through the North Island, that there's containment trying to do. It's kind of like there needs to be a better national plan, how we're going to deal with these issues, and what's going to be important. There's going to be other aquatic vertebrate type of incursions into New Zealand. And one of the things we said, well, who's looking out for those? Where's the testing being done? I think that we're starting to do some more eDNA testing, and I think nationally there's more coming about. So that's the general comments. In terms of specifics, what's happening now, the only thing I can add to probably, Joe, your understanding, because you're on the governance group, and Bruce's understanding, having talked with staff just in the last week or so, is I understand the MPI are going to place, well, Biosecurity New Zealand are going to place a staff member in our council to work with us, which means we should get someone more resource to work collectively on what we need to do. Just earlier this morning, the latest update came from the response, the government response team on this, and I see they're talking about they've now got a Karapero wash station in place and looking to put more in. They've got public awareness campaigns starting to ramp up around the main user weekends and whatever. I think that's about all I can add. Long-term plan, yeah, we've got a whole bunch of discussions in that biodiversity, biosecurity space, and as I say, we've got some money going in there, but I don't think it will ever be enough to deal with being talked about here. And the latest news I heard in terms of it moving upstream was where there'd been that concern at 5 Mile Bay, I think it was. That the latest confirmation is that it hasn't been picked up with eDNA testing or whatever.
Yeah, I think they've done some visuals as well at that location, and it's not been picked up, which is great news. But I mean, like all of us, I guess all of the things that are starting to happen probably should have been happening how many months ago is the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So if I could just add one more thing. So what I'm beginning to see, the messaging, and you might be able to confirm this, Joe, is we're starting to talk about the regional sector as a whole starting to respond to this because they're realising that, yes, there's containment in the Waikato. It's going to be not only at the Waikato River end, it's going to take other regions to put preventative things in at their ends as well. And I guess we've seen it in Ukataina, haven't we already? But it's but there's I think it's becoming a regional sector issue as opposed to just being the problem for one council to sort.
I'll just add to that, Chris, that I think there's still complacency. And, you know, I know MPI and Biosecurity New Zealand are working with other regional councils, but I mean, I think it's until it hits you where it hurts, kind of, you know, and you know that it's in your area, that complacency is still there a little bit. I think here the voting, etc. communities, certainly around Karapiro, have responded really well. Canoeing and Arma have responded really well to those things because they know that if they don't do the work here, then it does go back to they take their votes afterwards. Yeah, I think it is. It's probably a multi-sector approach again, Bruce. I think.
But I think the urgency is critical because we're coming up to summer. If we're ever going to get one, we're still waiting. But when we do get summer, it'll be the boat movements in summer which determine where we end up with golden clam. And
according to the paper, there's some sort of app scanning system in place in the Bay of Plenty.
Yeah, GPS app.
So, but I'm assuming that's voluntary. And so why is it only Lake Okataina that's got rahui on it?
Turn the mic.
Push the right hand button.
the right hand.
Tēnā koutou, kono kine kasun tōku ingoa. And I guess I'm going to respond with another hat on to that question, and that's I'm on the Te Arawa Lakes Trust Board. And the reason why Ukataina itself has just closed, not the rest of our lakes, is that iwi Ngāti Tarawhai have taken it upon themselves. And if I may say what you're all talking about here, it's the slow response that is happening around the councils and those agencies that are involved. And that's why only Ukataina at this stage. Having said that, watch the space with the other lakes. Yeah, kia ora. If that answered why it's just Ukataina. These 13 other lakes, and those discussions will have to be had, but that iwi in conjunction with Te Arawa Lakes Trust.
Yeah, because I mean, no, thanks, Nikki. It kind of raises the question: do we have to go iwi partners and be a bit more stringent, given that summer is coming? You know, because again, I think it's luck that it's not in Lake Taupō. It's not.
I think that might be a good start.
Because the process is that the iwi proposed a rahui and then MPI come in behind them and kind of give it some
Endorse it, support it.
Yeah.
I think that'll be great, Stuart. That's a start, and it shows some collaboration and support, because we can only do it if we're all supporting each other. So I think it's a great place to start, Stuart.
Yeah, and my understanding is that declaration to unwanted organism was the trigger point at which we can actually start doing things like that. And so that's in place. So the question is, what will happen over summer? Will we just watch, or what will happen?
I might raise it to the River Authority as a good opportunity to block the river iwi wide down as well.
Yes, so
Okay. I think just on that, just in finishing off on that kaupapa, it has become sort of for some control, but a preventative to entering sort of other waterways. Particularly when we look at the Te Arawa Lakes, they are currently open for trout fishing season. So, you know, I mean, the eDNA monitoring will come in quite handy to detect potentially if that has been sort of spread in the lakes. I think we've identified as a pathway to, with Joe, the LTP and the focus on biodiversity, thinking about the habitat for our taonga species. That's certainly one approach. Also, as an example of where that's sort of worked quite well collectively in other areas sort of up north that I've seen where regional councils have implied sort of bylaws around recreational boating. I mean, that's potentially another option there in considering how we can all sort of play that part. Thanks, Joe. If there are any other questions and or comments on that, I'll let Jo continue on with her report.
The freshwater review engagement, just to redo that. And the final thing that was on our topics was the review of the joint DMA and implementation plan, but not managed to have back here into that yet. So do that. We're looking to do that probably. Chris and I catch up and then wraps.
Yeah, we haven't got there yet.
So are there any questions? Further questions on Joe's report? No, cut pie. So I to confirm that the report has been received. Moved. Seconded. Cedric. So just moving on, we have, and as I mentioned earlier, received an additional report that is from Deborah on the integrated catchment management, but I have, Grant. Go to Grant.
Yeah.
Kia ora tātou, everybody. And I'd just like to thank you for allowing us to drop a late report into your agenda. We missed the agenda closing deadline by a small amount. Report, which we will run through in a moment, just get it up, it's a summary of it's a summary of the catchment restoration activities, a snapshot within the region, and then more detail on what we've been doing in Euro. But just to introduce myself, so I'm the section manager that looks after catchment restoration for the Waikato catchment out to the west coast. So Taupo all the way down to the mouth of the Waikato, out to the west coast. Most of my team are here in Hamilton, but we have a small team in Taupo who work in Upper Waikato in your area. And the team leader is Deb Nicol, who's online and we'll be talking in a minute. And just to expand a little, Deb has recently taken up the role of zone manager for Upper Waikato and Taupo. So Deb will be our principal contact for these types of meetings into the future with help from whoever we need to provide. Thought with your permission, we just run through a few of the key points of the report. I appreciate you won't have read it or even possibly seen it yet. And we've just left it as a draft report. We're happy to take any questions or follow-up questions or come and meet with you in Rotorua if need be to talk about any of the work we're doing. Just by way of a little bit of introduction, this table on the screen shows a regional summary of the type of catchment restoration work we're doing. Now, this work is its predominant focus is around improving water quality by way of reducing soil erosion, excluding stock from streams and wetlands, and in those retirement areas, planting either native plants or willow poles for bank stability or whatever it might be. So the region is managed in terms of zones, and you can see down the left-hand side there, Central Waikato, which includes Hamilton and Karapiro, Coromandel, Lake Taupo, Upper Waikato, the lower end of the Waikato, Waihapiako, Waipa, West Coast. And in the first column there, you can see it runs through the various amounts of fencing, stream bank protected native plants and so forth. And so, you know, a regional total 230 kilometres of fencing, 136 kilometres of stream bank protected, almost 1 million native plants planted, predominantly in riparian areas, just trying to get a bit of shade on streams and to hold those areas together. Willows and poplars are planted as poles, like 3 metre long sticks, if you like. Willow poles next to rivers, and these are sterile willows that have been worked. They're not the pest species, crack willow, grey willow, and other willows, pussy willow. These are particular species bred. They do not have seed. They don't spread from fragments. So they're sterile. River management structures. So this is either using rocks or logs to do two things. One is to reduce riverbank erosion, and the other is to improve biodiversity for in-stream life. So by being careful and designing these structures, you can provide habitat and flow variation for tuna and other freshwater fish, native freshwater fish, and other species that live in the streams. Waterway obstruction removal, that is often removal of trees that fall in. Once they fall in, and the streams try to go around them and erode the banks. Quite a lot of our response, river management responses, to go and remove big obstructions that are well beyond a landowner's capability. There might be massive pine trees, or they might be giant poplars, or whatever they might be. Just in the last column there, 1,726 hectares of total area retired, which is a significant area. And of course, all this work that we do is in partnership with different iwi groups, landowners, and others, and a good chunk of it was funded from MPI, MFE, MB out of Wellington with the post-COVID recovery response. And in the Waikato, we also have the Waikato River Authority, where we've been very fortunate in getting significant funding from the Waikato River Authority over the last quite a few years now, particularly in the Waipa catchment, but also plenty of other places as well. So that's sort of a regional summary, if you like, and I will scroll. I'll pass to Deb. If there are there any questions on the regional summary? Otherwise, I'll pass to Deb and we'll just run through some more specific areas to your rohi.
Any question? No, carry on.
Cool.
Thank you.
Ora tātou. Ko Deborah Nicol, tōku ingoa. Thank you very much, Grant, for introducing me as it's day 2 of the zone manager for the Lake Taupo and Upper Waikato region. As you can see in the map of the Terrat boundary, the Terrat Rohi, we have a small catchment team in Taupo, but we're doing some really significant works in the Rohi. A large piece of work we're involved in is the Whitinaki Catchment Restoration Project. And those of you unfamiliar with the catchment, it is a 26,000 hectare catchment comprised of over 60% of LUC 7 lands, which is quite steep. The area is quite intensively farmed with dairy, and there is a sedimentation, high sedimentation in the Whinnaki Arm. So this is a project developed together by Terrat and Council, partly funded by Waikato River Authority, and we're trying to address the high sediment load occurring in the Whinnaki Arm. The desired outcomes, of course, are reducing sediment through planting, through fencing off of seeps, and enhancing riparian areas with native plants. Some of the outcomes we've had in the second stage of our project, if you can see, are in this past year are 3,500 meters of fence, 17 hectares retired, and over 16,000 native plants planted. And since works in stage 2, since July 1st of 2021 to now, as you can see in the totals, we have over 10 kilometers of new fencing, 30 hectares retired, and over 26,000 native plants, plus 6,000 exotic plants planted. With the map in the next slide, this is an area, this is the catchment itself. The light green you see is docklands, so you can see on the western ridge of the Arawa Range, retired and protected. In dark green, we have some historical protected areas through land improvement agreements, which were historical scheme of retiring lands in co-agreements, which are land improvement agreements. These are agreements between the landowner and Waikato Regional Council. The tundra yellow color is stage 1 of the Whinnaki project. And those are the properties that we've done retirement areas and we've done restoration works on. And the pink area is stage 2. So we're working our way through the catchment, trying to do some linkages and expand our areas protected, all in the effort to protect from sedimentation going into that Whinnaki Arm. If you go to the next slide, please, Grant. Just up from that. So within the Terrat Rohi, we've had limited river management works occurring just recently due to ongoing staff vacancy in the area. But I'm pleased to say that we have a new river management officer that'll be starting in January. But in the meantime, we are still being supported by river engineers that are in the Hamilton office. And any works that we do involve basically clearing of any blockages that poses any flood or erosion risk. A large project that we're doing in the Terrat Rohi is in the Mangakara stream. It's a project with three partners: Te Paraki Land Trust, Balance Agri-Nutrients, Guyton Farms, and then it's part funded by Waikato Regional Council and Waikato River Authority. You can see some of the works there. Stage 1, the first photo is stage 1, where we have plantings. The willows have already been removed. We've done native plantings. In the 2 other photos, we have stage 2 and 3, where we're extending it's the 1.6 kilometer reach of the stream. So we're extending the willow clearance and preparing the lands for planting in natives next winter. If you go to the next slide, or it's extend down. Familiar to Terrat is the Puerto Stream to Te Awa o Waikato Restoration Project. This is Ngāti Tahu Ngāti Whaua led project supported by Wairakei Pastoral and Waikato Regional Council, Ministry of Environment, MFE. So the pinpoint there is essentially the bridge. So that's the bridge going on to Broadlands Road, and that's the Puerto Stream flowing towards the Waikato River. So the restoration that's occurring is on the true left. where there's willow control, native plantings. On the true right, Waikato Regional Council has committed to doing willow control alongside the landowner's portion of land to extend the works down to the confluence. And in the end, they hope to put it in 20,000 native plants. If anyone is driving past that area, it's starting to look really fantastic down there. The plants are 2 and 3 years old. And I'm sure the anglers are enjoying their walk as they go through, and there's more access to open water. And if you continue on, biodiversity and biosecurity activities occurring within the office in the Terrat Rohi, predominantly for possum maintenance control, is currently being undertaken by EPRO on the western side of the Pairoa Range, as you can see there. Also, there's a further 700 hectares of trapping occurring on private land and Maori reservation forest. And these are traps using self-resetting AT220s. If you continue on, a national wallaby program is underway, trying to contain the wallabies, eradicate wallabies outside of containment areas, and over time slowly reduce the size of the containment area. The map that's being shown is quite impressive. It shows the area within the Rohi that wallaby dog surveillance has occurred, and that's in the red hashed area, or red grid line area, I should say. Purple is the 1080 coverage. Wallabies shot are in the red dots, and all the located wallaby indications are purple and blue dots. So there's quite a bit of work being done on the wallaby protection. Yep.
So I was just trying to, hi, kia ora, Deb, I was just trying to get my bearings on this map. Is that
Reporoa, where the cursor is?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
I see.
Broadlands Road, and then that's the that would be Waitapu area.
Oh, so it's north
Yep.
face, it's a north facing,
Yeah.
north aligned map, is it?
So the
Yeah.
two lakes at the top of the image are at Waitapu, aren't they?
The two lakes up there are in, no, those are in the Bay of Plenty.
They're
Those
all
are
the way up
closer
there.
to Rotorua, yes.
That's Okataina. Is the top one, and just someone will know, remind me what the second one is.
What
Also
is the other?
Kakahi and Tarawera.
Got it now.
So the cluster of dots is near Monga Kakaramia. Is that right?
Correct.
I'm trying to just finally.
It is, it is.
Yeah, we need a better map.
Yeah, it's just, if you see the map on the agenda, William's just given me, you can see Lake Taupo in the bottom left-hand corner, which puts it, helps line it up.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, it's a bit difficult.
There you go.
But as you can
Thank
see, I mean, they're doing grid work so far west up into Atia Murray. So certainly a concern, the wallaby spread.
Just a small point. Obviously, I don't know if it's obvious, but the biosecurity work, the possum control, the wallaby work, and the weed control work that Deb's to talk about is covered by Petra, a different team within the council, and we're reporting the information on their behalf. But I'm sure they would be happy to expand on any of the information or detail at a future meeting or in between meetings even.
Yeah, and this certainly is a better map, Grant, showing the wallaby progressive containment area, which they're hoping to shrink over time. Thank you. And as far as pest plant control, African feathergrass, it's listed as eradicated pest plant. So there's ongoing control of an infestation at Waitapu that's occurring. And then also another active site near Waidaake. Japanese knotweed is being controlled. Climbing spindleberry, there's two important outlier sites, one in Aratiatia, and then yellow flag iris which is categorized for progressive containment. So that's work occurring between the rapids and Waitapu stream.
That map's a bit hard to see also, but there are yellow dots on the river. The river is red, and there are yellow dots, which it might be easy to see in the report as to control sites for yellow flag iris. There's quite a few of them.
Yep. Darwin's Barberry. There's some sites at Rainbow Mountain. Staff are working with Bay of Plenty Council with progressive containment of this pest plant. And of course, meeting quite a bit with Bay of Plenty on trying to fight that. Wilding conifers, progressive containment. There's works supporting the works in Iraqi Craco, Red Hills, Tutakal Forest. Wilding kiwi fruit, progressive containment at Kerosene Creek. There's a large patch at Kerosene Creek that they've been working through to try to eradicate. And yes, as Grant alluded to, that is through a different group doing the animal pest plants, and more information can be brought from them at subsequent meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. And just to wrap up that, so we're more than happy to come down to your office at any time and talk about any specific projects, or take some of your staff out to some of our sites. We've done work, because we haven't actually done much of that in the last few years. And this sort of report is, we expect to provide you this type of report once a year. And obviously there's a big gap between meetings, and one of the reasons we want to get into this meeting is the information becomes out of date. And in 3 months' time, it's already 9 months old, a lot of this information. So thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? I have one. Oh, no, go Joe, you first, and then I can finish.
I was going to thank you for the offer, and I know my team are here and would be really keen to go out. Progress. So
It was just a question, just out of interest, really. When we look at the Whirinaki catchments, we see some of the issues, and I guess sort of land use and impacting, and hence the focus on the soil engineering, soil solutions. But just out of interest, and Deborah, you might be able to answer that too, Grant, just understanding the historical context, the natural flow, out a lot of our streams, the Paweto stream, some of the headwaters that are on Kapinga, and some of our Māori Lands Trust. So they naturally, prior to 1961, when that dam was put in, and so it's sort of affected the flow. Has that sort of been taken into consideration when, working through some of the restorative projects in the catchments, where the impact is sort of creeping upwards as opposed to enabling a natural flow downwards? I mean, the engineering project does give way to ensuring, nothing more in sediment ends up in the catchments. But, there's sort of man-made sort of structures that prevent that kind of natural flow, I guess.
Probably the most significant stream that's affected by the dam is the Waitapu stream, in terms of the lower reach of it being controlled by Lake Oakuri.
Right.
I'm not aware of any others that are significant. Well, Deb, you'll be able to answer. Are there any other streams which the lake is impacting on in the lower reaches?
No. I mean, people argue that the Whirinaki stream is being impacted, but I think you can't ignore the amount of intensification of farming in that area. But
yeah, thanks, Debbie. I know the locals talk about the increase in sediment under the Whirinaki road bridge, I can't remember the name of the bridge, but over part of their lifetime, they've seen a massive, increase in sediment from build-up coming down the Whirinaki stream. And whether that's impacted by the lake or not, I'm not too sure. It will be interesting to see how our work fits in with freshwater farm plans and the regulatory, once the regulatory side kicks in, because obviously, the catchment restoration work is only a small, it's a part of the solution, but we're only able to impact on a relatively small part of the catchment, whereas a regulatory framework can impact on the whole catchment and all the farmers over time. So you'll have the regulatory framework requiring freshwater farm plans and actions to do things. And then over and above those actions, you'll have hopefully some assistance from the council still to do over and above work, which gives higher level benefits. We're talking, the next 10 years now. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, can I have someone confirm that the report, the ICM report, be received, please? And seconded. Aye, and I think that moves us into that's the end of our agenda today. Updates. Do we have final, I guess, words in closing today? For myself, I guess just sort of what's been apparent that our respective teams have been busy working hard at place, and I guess too centrally and at a national level. For me, in looking ahead, it will be interesting as the new government comes in, this 100-day plan and how that could actually impact the work that we've just been talking about today, specifically in the regulatory. Two key pieces of legislation are within that 100-day plan, the RMA and both affordable water reforms, both sort of impacting our sort of freshwater values at place, not just freshwater, but our whenua as well. So just thinking from me to the teams and to have our kaitiaki attend with us today has been great. Good for them to be able to observe and then go back to the office and sort of try to say, yep, we like that idea, and sort of become more involved in opportunities that are being presented. But just wishing everybody well over the next little while, and continue that our teams work closely together through our accord. But yes, thanks.
Yeah, I might just finish by saying we did note Grant's invitation. Because I would say that it's always great to come in and talk about these things in the office, if you like, but Grant, the idea of, being able to see some of those sites, collect and be able to stand on the stream bank or whatever and have the kōrero about how things are going and what's needed doing, and would be extremely valuable.
Yes.
So I've just accepted the invitation.
Lovely.
On our behalf. So yeah. Yeah, and that's all from me really. It's all been said. So thank you for all the people who reported today. Very interesting session.
We can close our hui with the karakia.
O ina mana takirua, Delia, Bruce, tēnā korua, koutou katoa, Cedric, Joe, koutou, tēnā koutou I tō koutou haere mai I tautoko te kaupapa ana he Karakia Whakamutunga. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, ki wate, ki mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, te ara takatau. Koera I rongo whakiire ake kei ronga, kia tīna. Haumi e, hui e, ai.
Good. Yeah, well, that would be great. to go and see some of those places. So, yeah, yeah.